guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror comedy from the United States, English language, released in the year 2016, directed by Jason Stewart, and this film is called Beyond the Gates. So Beyond the Gates is a board game that is one of the 80s board games where you get a group of friends, you play it. You've also got a VHS tape where someone on the screen will tell you what to do. Every now and then they'll tell you to come up to the screen and they'll scare you. So if you are a child of the 80s, you know about these board games, and this specific board game is called Beyond the Gates. Now Beyond the Gates is linked to the disappearance of a man who hasn't been seen in the last 6 months. He owned a VHS store, and so two estranged brothers, who's the sons of this man, they decide that they're going to clean out the store and prepare to move on with their lives. But this is where they come across the board game and they start to realise that the board game is linked to the disappearance. So they want to know what happened to their father, and the only way they can do that is by playing the game. And so when they play the game, there's very strange ladies on the screen, and this is where they realise that this game is basically emulating the things in real life. So it's kind of like a Jumanji type of film in a horror sense. So they start playing and they've passed the point of no return, and they're going to have to try and beat the game in order to not only save the life of their father but also their lives. But the problem is that no one's ever won this game. So in order to be the first people to win it, they're going to have a lot of teamwork and also a little bit of luck. So whether or not they can, something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Beyond the Gates. By far the biggest plus of this film is ultimately the sentimental value that it has for me and the nostalgia that it brought back, and it was a trip down memory lane. It felt like as soon as you step into the VHS store in this film, it was like a time machine. It was taking me back to those days where I really enjoyed horror board games. Case in point, Nightmare, which was a very popular game where a guy in a hood would be on the screen, and as you were playing the board game he would tell you things that were very funny, or he'd signal someone out to go really close to the screen and then scare them. And so that was a moment in my life that I actually really appreciated, and that was actually really the reasons why I got into horror in the first place. And so coming into this film, when you're seeing that, it does take you back. So it is a trip down memory lane, and as I said, it really feels like this actual VHS shot is actually a time machine. And you know, this is set in present day, but it's ultimately very obvious to see that what has inspired this film, and that is films of the 80s. You know, it is a very fun sort of vibe that the film has. It kind of feels like a Jumanji style of horror film. So if you like Jumanji and you want something a little bit more sinister, this is definitely going to appeal to you. It also has the 80s practical effects and its gore, and I was very surprised by how great the gore was. It was very, very brutal scenes, and I think that is a throwback to the 80s film. So everything, if you are a fan of 80s, you're really going to appreciate what this film is trying to do, and for that I would say it's definitely very interesting in what it's trying to do, and I would recommend it to people who are children of the 80s and who actually like these types of films. But unfortunately, however, the movie was a major letdown is because it takes itself too seriously. And that's ultimately the problem, is that you've got these two characters, these estranged brothers. It does take you into depths into what these brothers are all about, but it does cloud what the film wants to do. This film is supposed to be a horror version of Jumanji, and as a board game come to life, it should be a lot of fun. We don't really care about the characters. We want to know what is going to happen. We want to know what the monsters are that are going to be emulated in real life. And so that should have been the film's biggest focus. But unfortunately, you've got these two characters that are just not that interesting, and it does take a long time in order to get to the board game madness. And so a lot of people are going to be very disappointed by that. Yes, you've got the charm and the sentimental, nostalgic value that the film has, but that can only take you so far. And then you start to realise, okay, I'm not really caring as what's going on, is because I want to get to the board game madness. I don't really care what's going on between these brothers. I don't really care whether or not a brother can stand up for himself or not. That's not what the film should be about. So it feels like the movie didn't know what it wanted to do. Did it want to give you characters that you can really sympathise with, or did it want to give you board game madness? But unfortunately the two can't really blend together because there's not enough time. And so when the board game madness does take place, there's only about 3 sequences of it. And so I thought that the movie just got lost in what it wanted to try and do. It couldn't blend it together, so it really had to choose one or the other. But unfortunately I think it chose the wrong one, and so it takes itself a little bit too seriously. And in the end, what you get is a film that does have very impressive gore effects. Production level is very impressive. You know, it is a lower budget film, and I think the lower budget really does dampen the quality quite considerably, is because yes, it does have impressive gore effects and special effects, but there's just not enough of them to really appeal to you as a board game sort of horror film. So it does bill itself as something of a Jumanji style of horror film, but unfortunately it just takes itself a little bit too seriously for its own good, and in the end what it comes across as is a bit of disappointment and definitely a lost opportunity. So overall, for Beyond the Gates, I'm only going to give this one 2 stars. If you are a child of the 80s, I would recommend it for the fact that it is very sentimental, but apart from that, it just doesn't really have much going for it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.